how does coconut oil affect heart disease? And are there some studies out there, some scientific studies out there?
One of the big factors of confusion with coconut oil is that people think that it promotes heart disease because it's saturated fat content. Mm-hmm. Now, as we discussed earlier, the saturated fat in coconut oil is different from the saturated fat in meats or in other vegetable oils. It's a medium-chain fatty acid that actually protects against heart disease. And if you go to populations around the world that have a high coconut oil consumption, mm-hmm. you find that their heart disease rates are much lower. In fact, those people with the highest coconut oil consumption have the lowest heart disease rates in the world. For example, in Sri Lanka, in 1979, there was a survey that showed that every man, woman, and child in the country mm-hmm. consumed the equivalent of 120 coconuts a year. That's a lot of coconut and a lot of coconut oil. But in that year, they had the lowest rate of heart disease in the world. 1 out of every 100,000 deaths was caused by heart disease. Now compare that to America. At the same time, nearly half of the deaths were heart-related. And we don't eat hardly any coconut at all.
No, we don't.
Now, over time, in Sri Lanka, there's this anti-saturated fat campaign throughout the world, reduce your saturated fat content. So even in Sri Lanka, in the coconut regions, they started to reduce their saturated fat. And so coconut oil came down, and a very interesting thing happened. They replaced their coconut oil with polyunsaturated vegetable oils and margarines and things. And as coconut oil consumption came down, heart disease went up. Just the opposite of what, they thought would happen.
It was that apparent.
It was that apparent. In the coconut growing regions of India, the same thing happened. They were told to stop eating coconut oil because it's a saturated fat. Within 10 years, the heart disease rate tripled.
And those are scientific studies.
Right, these are studies, published studies.
Plus, you're dealing with people's cultures, too.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were told something that they were eating was unhealthy, and then they became unhealthier by changing their diet.
Right, and most of the heart disease cases in these coconut-growing countries come from the cities where people eat the least amount of coconut oil because they eat the imported oils. Mm-hmm. Now, when you go outside the cities into the villages that still rely on coconut oil as their primary source of dietary fat, heart disease is either rare or non-existent, even though that's the oil they eat predominantly in their diet. And they've done studies on these people, mm-hmm. and even the oldest people of the population live to be nearly 100 years old, who have been eating coconut oil